Finally, some proprietary games appear in this mostly free software series. It's about time that I had covered some old AAA games from the mid-aughts, and boy, do I have a bit to talk about. I'll get straight into talking about Need for Speed Carbon from 2006 and Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005 version. I am playing their Collector's Editions, Collectors and Black, for Carbon and M-Dub respectively. Yes, they are also abandonware, since EA doesn't work on these games anymore. Did I mention these are EA Black Box titles too? I don't want to waste any more time, as I'm excited to finally have played both games on this list. I'll play many more in the future too, just you wait. That said, as I keep researching and you keep listening, all I care about is that you're enlightened enough to consider the software in this series. My name is Nikendo Cocules, and this is Computing Comparison. The mechanics and automobile selection for the vanilla games will be covered. I will also add in some additional notes and not spoil the stories for both games, if you haven't played any of them yet. I usually don't remember the stories anyway, so I won't be able to let out the spoilers regardless. By the way, yes, I'm playing the PC versions of the games with modifications that I hand-picked. Housekeeping out of the way, let's start by covering what this series is real quick. Need for Speed, abbreviated as just NFS, is a multi-platform arcade and/or simcade racing game series spanning almost 30 years since its release on August 31st, 1994. It had gone through multiple developers, most famously Black Box, an EA studio that shut down in 2012 due to the publisher's detestable actions. Speaking of, Electronic Arts, or EA as they're known, was, and still is, responsible for publishing the games since day one. Yes, some of the games are good, and they have come from this specific series. And these two are part of the top 5 NFS games of all time. I decided to cover these two today, since I had enough time to play them with modifications as stated. Though, this was my first time playing both before the writing of this episode. Let's start the comparisons by covering Most Wanted first. Most Wanted is a 2005 street racing title, the 9th main installment of the series. It's designed as an open-world racer, where the goal is to beat a list of notorious street racers, known simply as the Blacklist. You, the player, eventually get the automobile on the cover, a 2005 BMW M3 GTR E46, for beating the most notorious on that list. Within the confines of the fictional city of Rockport comes quite a number of events, some of which are the same in Carbon, which will be discussed later. These include Circuit, Sprint, Toll Booth, Drag, Lap Knockout, and Speed Trap. Only Knockout and Drag don't make it into Carbon, since Drag is a bit of a nightmare, and Knockout didn't seem like a good idea otherwise. Toll Booth would eventually become Checkpoint in Carbon, so it wasn't cut, but redesigned. Next, I will discuss the mechanics, since they differ from Carbon in a few ways. From what I've played, M-Dub seems to be more stiff because of my passive aggro conservative driving style, though as long as I keep it clean, I tend to go with reckless abandon when it counts. Otherwise, I tend to keep it on the down low and bust out my aggression where it's needed. You can see this in sections windier than Lombard Street in San Francisco, but otherwise, the open-world nature of the racing is equivalent to that of the German Autobahn in multiple sections on the map of Rockport. For most of the aspects of an automobile, however, the stats that were given, in my opinion, are a complete lie to me. This will be the same with Carbon, which will be discussed later. Now, on the automobile side, there's a decent amount of them, but not many of the famous ones are in this lineup, whereas you have way more on the Carbon side of things. Sure, you'll get your Audi A4 and TT, or Aston Martin DB9, Ford GT, Lamborghini Gallardo, Mitsubishi Lancer, and some Mercedes-Benz machines mixed in there. I do like any Japanese automobile, however, as that's the good stuff nowadays. More than ever. Though not in the digital age, I'd say. I can't wait to try the Subaru Impreza WRX STI in this game, though, as that's a tuner treat in the JDM scene. In the Black Edition, there are more automobiles than I could even imagine, and I only need a few of them from what I'm aware of. I have used the likes of the Fiat Punto, Audi A10, and Toyota Supra. Too bad the Supra is another clout drug in the JDM community. Compare that to a gift wrap during Christmas time, only to find out you got a singular block of dog feces instead of a Hot Wheels JDM toy automobile that you've been asking for months to get. I think that explains it all for Most Wanted for the time being. Methinks we shall move on to Carbon now. Need for Speed Carbon is a 2006 open-world street racing game, the 10th main installment of the NFS series. It was released for multiple consoles, just like MDub, including the Nintendo Wii, which was a launch title for the console in November of that year. There was also a mobile port by Rovio. Yes, that Rovio would be behind the Angry Birds franchise since 2009. Anyway, moving on. This game sees you racing through Palmont City after becoming the most wanted in Rockport, taking over all 4 districts of Palmont, which is massive. Though to get to the northern region of Silverton, you have to take over the first 3 boroughs first. You start by taking over the East Canyon in Kempton. Then you have the choice to either take over Fortuna or downtown. You have to take over all 3 in order to unlock Silverton. That was a bit complicated for you. The mechanics in this game are a bit better, in my opinion, than those of MDub 05. But I do have a few rips I'll go over off the bat. Again, just like MDub, it's a bit stiff. But it's not as flagrant as MDub's, but it's still there, just a tiny bit. Maybe I'm not used to playing these older titles, as I've played the remake of Hot Pursuit and Most Wanted on iOS, but that was a different time when I didn't know any better. The second rip I have may be an understandable one, but it's a rip nonetheless. This mainly has to do with the cash in the events. It's not that much, and I try to save up for upgrading my automobile, but I'm just barely able to do it. Maybe it's just me being an idiot with how I spend the cash in-game, or the events are not at a higher stake. Thankfully, I almost completed the game without even using Z-Menu Carbon, which is a trainer mod for this game if you don't know. However, They should have just made the events be worth just a tiny bit more. Around another 5% would have done it. So I could keep some for the next upgrade or automobile I would eventually be required to grab. So be it from me, really. Now, that rip on the in-game currency was a small rant, but one nonetheless. I can't say the same for the automobile selection, which is a good combination of tuners, exotics, and muscles, though the muscles could have used better rep than the tuners or exotic. That doesn't matter. What does is how you go about even driving these machines, depending on what you drive. The muscle automobile is designed with acceleration in mind, so for those who like acceleration like I do, are recommended to drive one of those. If you are more for handling, then tuners are your best bet. I tend to use tuners a lot, as they provide possibly the best handling I've seen in any NFS game yet. Exotics are the speedy boys, so if you like the top speed, and that's a primary concern, grab one of those instead. It's got some good rep from a few respectable brands that aren't Toyota, since they don't like street racing, but officially sanctioned racing. I would understand why. Toyota automobiles have since returned to street racing games like Forza Horizon 5, from what I could gather, however. There are even Lamborghini automobiles, but not Bugattis. Thankfully, you can fix that with add-ons, just as with many older NFS titles. Maybe some newer ones too. I wonder if the OG has any mods. Most likely not. In Carbon, the modes are a bit different, as mentioned from the MDub segment. Some of the race modes remain, but this time, 2 new ones surface. You have the Canyon Duel, which you basically race to the style of a Japanese tollgate event. Then there's the Checkpoint, which comes from Toll Booth in MDub. In the Canyon Duel, your goal is to either try to pass the opponent if you're following, or go as far away as possible from your opponent if you're leading. Collisions are bad news, and if you want to go off the road, you'll lose the duel automatically. There's nothing else to say about it, so I'll just move on from here. That was a quick look at 2 Need for Speed games, out of quite a few titles out there. There are also some on Steam too, but I'll play the confirmed abandonware titles like MDub 05, Underground 2, Carbon, and maybe even the OG and 2 Special Edition, if I get the chance. That said, these are fantastic proprietary arcade racers to check out, especially with a fantastic modding scene that's still vibing and thriving to this day. That's why, even though these games are not developed or updated officially anymore, they're still worked on by passionate fans of the games. I happened to have modded the games myself using the mods available, though I hadn't done anything more than dip my toes into the modding community for these games. Unlike Minecraft, where its modding community thrives, despite the backlash from Microsoft. That said, I'm out of time for today's episode. If you have any ideas for future software you want me to cover, please feel free to comment down below. If it's free open source software, then that will have priority over the proprietary freeware, since I like using FOSS more than freeware. That said, thank you, and good night.